Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Dr. Justin Robertson. Dr. Robertson is superintendent of Hamilton County Schools. Justin, before I put you on the spot and ask you who has better barbecue, Chattanooga or Memphis, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
It's always Dunkin'. I started years ago, and it was more about the morning routine of where I was working and where the coffee was. And so I've stuck with Dunkin' for probably 15 years.
That makes sense. It's got to be close and ready to go.
That's right.
Do you doctor it up or you?
Yes, cream and sugar.
Really?
The real sugar.
Yeah. And how many you do before you, or do you keep drinking it in the office or do you?
Oh, no. This one cup, done.
One cup and done.
Well, it's a big, it's a pretty big cup.
Well, since we're only audio, it's a thermos. No. Well, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
I know we had a couple of dates and things happen, and so glad you're able to make it. Everyone has an opinion about schools, but I'm more interested until we get to that portion of it of how you got into all this. So you grew up in Chattanooga, right? Well, you were born in Nashville.
Yeah. So my dad and mom got married early, and my dad was in the Marines, had my oldest brother while he was still active. Realized that's a hard place for a family to be, and I started working in the post office in Nashville, and then in 1983 got transferred to Signal Mountain to be the postmaster on Signal Mountain. So we moved here in 1983, right before I started kindergarten, and stayed here really ever since until college, and then the time that I spent in Memphis.
Yeah, to me, that's a pretty cool thing to be the postmaster, because that's one of those positions that have been with the country since its formation. And wasn't Ben Franklin the original postmaster general?
I think so. He's got some stories. Even on Little Signal Mountain, there are some really interesting stories of interactions with people up there. He's got a crazy story about an interaction with Byron Delabeckwith.
I was going to ask. That's probably one of the stories. Yeah.
But so moved to Signal Mountain and spent. He spent 10 years up there, so I basically spent elementary through middle school. Mm-hmm. Signal Mountain back then was a lot smaller than it is now. K through 3 at Bachman. You had a K through 3 at Signal Mountain Elementary. Then 4 and 5, everybody went to Thrasher. And then the old middle school, which is across Taft Highway. But I enjoyed Signal Mountain so much that when we were moving back in 2008, I tried to get my wife to move there then. She wouldn't do it. And then finally in 2015, we moved back up to Signal.
So you're back up on Signal?
Yep.
When I moved here, we moved out into the Middle Valley area. And along that time, I met Chip Baker. And being the proud Signal Mountain that he is, when we decided to move, we ended up on the North Shore. I got the hardest pitch for Signal Mountain. There's not a bigger proponent for Signal Mountain than Commissioner Baker.
It's a great place to raise a family, and I think Chip would agree. And, of course, his kids went through as much as Signal and even some in Red Bank as they could. But it's just a good place to raise a family.
Yeah. And I think all the surveys that come out of places to live, Signal usually ranks towards the top in Tennessee. So you had two brothers. What's the age difference?
6 years from oldest to youngest. I'm the youngest, and we're all basically 3 years apart. So 6'3", and then me.
Were you guys a terror? Did you get along with each other? Or was the
our
age
oldest brother was just the peacemaker, calmest guy you'll ever meet. I don't remember ever getting into a fight with him. Me and the middle brother, Jason, who lives here, who's a physician at Center for Sports Medicine, we fought a lot. fought a lot.
But that's what brothers do.
Yeah, it was healthy competition. So.
Yeah. My mother was an only child, and she would say, "Why can't you all just get along? I would have done anything for a sibling." And meanwhile, we're beating the heck out of each other, and having a good time, and we love each other today.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So what'd you do on Signal for fun? You were into sports, or?
Yeah, we had never heard of soccer back in 1983. Never heard of it. We moved up to Signal Mountain, and people used to always say back then, I don't know if it's actually true, that per capita it had the highest amount of kids playing soccer in the state at the time. And so played soccer, played a bunch of youth sports, but soccer was, the thing that I loved, the thing that my brothers loved. My dad even started reffing up on Signal Mountain. So we were heavily involved in that, and still to this day, some of my best friends are guys that I met playing soccer at 5 years old.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
So when you were growing up there, they had the elementary and middle schools, but didn't have a high school at the time.
Didn't have a high school, and so people went to Red Bank. So my oldest brother actually graduated from Red Bank High School. My middle brother went there his freshman and sophomore year, and I don't really know the story. I think it was connected to soccer. He was a really good high school soccer player, and at the time, Red Bank was not very good.
Yeah.
And so his junior year, transferred to Boyd Buchanan and played soccer his junior and senior year at Boyd Buchanan, and then I went to Boyd Buchanan also. Yep.
Yeah. What did you do as a teenager growing up? Did you have part-time jobs or anything like that?
Oh, yes. Had some doozies. First job I ever had was at Martin Boyd Christian Home, which is out off of Bonnie Oaks, and a friend's mom ran it, and so she got me a job in the cafeteria.
Oh,
and
wow.
I just was not emotionally prepared for it. You're dealing with a lot of elderly people. I was 16 years old, and I remember in the cafeteria, what kind of broke the straw for me was I saw a lady fall, and I was the only one there, and I was 16 years old, like trying to figure out what to do, and I was like, this is too much for me, and so I went and started working construction from there, and in high school basically did, either construction jobs. I had a lawn service one summer with a good friend, was actually a school custodian one summer.
Really?
And so did those kind of jobs in high school, and then kind of got into, I think, what everybody does in college is waiting tables.
Yeah. On the school custodian thing, it's nice that you can say you started at the very bottom.
It was a fun job. It was me and two buddies, and it was at Boyd Buchanan, and we basically, like, from stripping and waxing all the floors to cleaning blinds, and we did it all.
But that gave you a great basis, particularly when you were COO of the schools, of knowing what all the functions are and what needs to happen in a school for it to be a great place to learn.
I hope that we were doing a better job at Hamilton County than what I did back then, but yes.
Yeah, probably a little bit different. So you go to high school at Boyd Buchanan. What was of interest to you at that point? Was it always education?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, I think that I knew even in high school that I wanted to be a teacher. I was, sports is what kept me interested. I tell people all the time that elementary school, I was not a very good student. My parents told me in middle school that if you don't make A's and B's, you're not playing soccer, and I believed them. Yeah. And so I made A's and B's from there, but I wasn't in high school. I didn't go to school because of the academics. I went because of sports. My freshman year started playing basketball, so played basketball and soccer, and was really into that. But the people that influenced me most back then, outside of my dad, were two high school coaches. It was soccer coach Jim Wood, who's still heavily involved in soccer program there, and then basketball coach Ricky Perry, who is in Nashville now, and I still stay in touch with every once in a while. But the impact that they had on me as a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid was tremendous. Mm-hmm. And so I think I knew then that that's what I wanted to do, and it took me about a year into college to be like, okay, this is the route we're running down. Was
there anything in particular that either one of them or both of them did that really you just the light bulb kind of went off and said, wow,
number one, they cared about me, like I knew it, but they also didn't cut me any slack.
Yeah, and that's an important one at that age.
It is. Well, I think it's important for all of our kids. Like in Hamilton County, when we talk about a warm demander, and a warm demander is someone that holds really high expectations for kids, but also understands their stories and how to motivate them to live up to that expectation. And so, I talk about Coach Perry and Coach Wood all the time. Both of them, I have very clear memories at different points of my high school career where they pulled me aside and let me have it. And it wasn't nice. It wasn't friendly. I don't know if they could have gotten away with it today.
Yeah.
But as a 16-year-old, that's what I needed. And they did it from a place of care, not because they were trying to be jerks, but because they knew what my potential was and knew that I wasn't living up to that potential. And so that's what made an impact on me, was not just them pushing me really hard, but knowing that they were doing it from a place of care.
At the time, did you resent them or recognize that? And I'm asking that from the standpoint because so many people who look back and say, Coach so-and-so was a mentor or this teacher had a great influence on me, hated them at the time.
My freshman and sophomore year, I definitely never hated them. I didn't understand.
That's a better way to put
my
it.
Freshman and sophomore year. By the time I was a junior and senior, I knew exactly who they were, what they meant, what they wanted for me. And so even as a junior and senior, I loved them both and would have done anything for them.
Yeah. So that had a big influence on you and going into education. So you're at Boyd. What's the next step when you decide I want to go into?
So, I talked a little bit about playing soccer a couple of different places, but ultimately, I wasn't that good. So if I was going to do it, it was just because it was the right setting. And so I went to Lipscomb University in Nashville for the school, not for soccer, but I did play soccer.
Mm-hmm.
And Lipscomb was in Nashville. It's a small liberal arts school that was great for me. I loved being in Nashville. Nashville is not the Nashville that it is today. I mean, you could go to Broad Street and find a parking spot.
Yeah.
And so I loved being in Nashville, had some friends that were from Chattanooga that went there, but also met a ton of great people from other places, and just had a tremendous experience.
And you took the education path at that standpoint.
I think I resisted it for about the first semester and then went education and never changed my mind. So I was a history education major with an English minor. And the English minor was more trying to think forward. I knew that at some point I would want to go to graduate school and want to pursue higher degrees. And I realized at the time that, being able to read and write would be super important. And so I added that on. I actually didn't have to have a minor because of history education. Technically, history was the major, education was the minor, but to get me prepared, I thought it would be important to do English.
That's such an important note. And I look at it from, a business standpoint, and having interviewed hundreds of people over the years, and that communication aspect, that when you've got someone applying for a job who may not be a good verbal communicator or a good written communicator, I think it's an underrated skill that we assume everyone is good at, but you really have to get better at it.
You got to get better at it. And, in graduate school, the ability to read something quickly and break it down and be able to understand it was not something that I was great at in high school. And so I needed to get better at it. And it paid off huge because you're going, especially for my doctorate degree, the amount of reading that was involved and the amount of writing was, incredible.
Well, go through that, the two post degrees. Where'd you go? Were they all
so
at
the
Lipscomb?
time? No, I was at, we'd moved to Memphis. So my wife is from Chattanooga. So I actually knew my wife as far back as late middle school, but both went to Lipscomb and, ran in the same groups. We ended up getting married a year after we graduated and then moved to Memphis a year later. And so when we were in Memphis, she was in pharmacy school. And I remember talking to her at the time, and we were thinking maybe we would stay there 3 years. She would do her rotations somewhere else. But I realized that I was like, if we just stay 5 years, like I could get everything done here too. And Casey has always been super encouraging to me to like, push me probably further than I would have gone otherwise. But she was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I went to Union University, which was in Jackson, but they had a satellite campus in Memphis, and I was at Germantown High School, and the satellite campus was like 2 miles down the road. So it ended up being perfect, but got a master's in education, which is probably the one educational decision that I look back and I'm like, I should have done, a master's in English or a master's in business administration, because after I got that and then got my doctorate in school leadership, the master's is pretty much useless.
Yeah, you got your doctorate.
Yeah. And so did all that at Union, and look back on it, I'm like, I don't know how I had the time to do it, because this was pre anything online.
Yeah.
And so, I was going all day Saturday, one night a week. And then EDS and doctorate was at times 2 nights a week and Saturdays. And so it was a lot. And I was coaching girls and boys soccer at the time, but she was in pharmacy school. And so she wasn't home anyway. So I
you didn't have kids at the time?
That's right. Yeah.
My dad used to tell me, you might as well do it. Time's going to go by anyway. And I wish I'd listened to a lot of that stuff, but that was a good point on your part, that you're going to be there 5 years. It's all right here. Might as well knock it out.
And again, our daughter was born in Memphis, and by the time she was born, I was done with all my classwork. I was just finishing writing my dissertation. And even with that, I'm like, man, I barely had time to get it done, because your life changes so much when you have kids.
Oh yeah.
And time, it's gone. You don't have time to go play golf. You don't have time to barely cut the grass anymore.
When we were having our first daughter, a guy I worked with, my wife Susie was she was in her last month, and he says, Mike, when Susie comes to you with her suitcase and says it's time to go to the hospital, walk her out to the car, then both of you turn around and look at your house. It'll never be the same.
That's true. We were in a 1,000 square foot house in Memphis, and I remember when bringing her home, and my mother-in-law, who lives here in Chattanooga, stayed with us for about a week after she was born, and I was relegated to the couch that whole time, because we literally had our bedroom and then the room that we had to put a crib in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's where we have some commonality. So I grew up in Memphis, and your first job was going to Memphis, Germantown High School?
Yes.
Where I went to elementary school at Germantown.
Yeah.
So talk about that. You get out of Lipscomb. What's the process of
So I went actually back and taught at Boyd Buchanan for 2 years. And then when we made the decision to move, I remember I'd only told one person at the school that, like, hey, we're about to do this. And 2 days later, this is back when they posted jobs online on boards, and I went, and he walked up and put something down that said head coach Germantown High School. And I was like, that's awesome. So reached out to him, sent emails to everybody that I could find that was associated with Germantown, went 2 weeks later, interviewed, and found out like in May that I got the job. So initially went as a history teacher and boys head coach. And then a year later, the girls job opened. So I did girls in the fall and boys in the spring.
And soccer was growing pretty big at the high school level.
Yeah, Memphis, it was crazy. Like the level of competition back then. If you made it out of our district, like you had a good chance to win the state. One year with the girls, we beat Houston in the region finals. Both of us qualified for the state, and then Houston ended up winning the state. So
wow, that's pretty competitive.
It was awesome, but it had great memories of being there. Germantown was a really good place. It was back when Memphis City Schools was still in place, and Shelby County was separate. And so all that's changed now. And Germantown actually is part of Memphis City Schools, which they're about to close Germantown High School.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Oh man, that place has been there forever.
I know, it's really good memories. We were there about a year and a half ago for my daughter's lacrosse, and I just like took a whip around the campus and saw where my portable used to be. They've torn it down now, but really good memories there.
Yeah, your point on the rivalry between Germantown and Houston, I know we're getting into some deep Memphis talk, but they're only about 5 miles apart. I mean, they're
maybe less than that.
Yeah. So you guys were at it on the soccer fields.
Yeah. First week that I was at Germantown, on Fridays, typically everybody wears like a polo and, dresses down a little bit. I put on a black soccer polo, which I didn't think twice about. And I got there and the first person that saw me, like literally pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, we don't wear black here. It's red."
Yeah. Who was the principal at Germantown at that time?
Oh my gosh.
Was it Ernest Chisholm?
No, Ernest Chisholm had just left, and oh my goodness, I cannot believe
I was more interested if it was Mr. Chisholm because
I interviewed with him. He retired, and the person that was the vice principal. As soon as I walk out of here, I'm going to remember his name.
So you're in Memphis 5 years, or was it longer?
Just over 6?
Just over 6 years. You go in as the soccer coach, and all that time was at Germantown.
I was there for 4 years, and then applied for assistant principal jobs, and fortunately got offered a job at Bartlett Elementary, which was nuts because I didn't have any experience in elementary school, like zero. I'd always been in high school, and principal there, Paige Watson, took a huge chance on me. And I spent 2 years there. It would have been longer but our daughter was born, and, we're trying to think, how do we get back to Chattanooga?
Yeah.
Much easier to move as an assistant principal than a principal.
Oh, I bet. How does that process work? You have no experience in elementary, but you go in as the assistant principal. So is that intimidating? What do you got to do differently?
I was scared to death. I spent, she basically at one point in the summer was like, "Hey, you're not getting paid. You don't have to come here every day." I was like, "Well, I'm just trying to make sure I'm ready." And I did everything I could that summer. And I remember the afternoon before kids came, I went to her office and I was like, "Hey, Paige," I was like, "I know what to do at the beginning. I'm car duty. I know how we're running it. I know, where to be right at the beginning of school." I was like, after 8:05, I don't know what to do. And she kind of laughed at me like that. And she was like, "Trust me, you'll figure it out." And she was right. I mean, as soon as the bell rang, there were 950 kids at Bartlett Elementary. And it just, there was always something to do.
It kept you busy.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like when we were talking before we started today, you said your day's pretty booked up.
Yeah.
And just like that, you may not have it on the calendar, but that school's just going to keep going.
That's right.
What'd you like about that?
Elementary, what I liked about it, and I've had the privilege of being in elementary, middle, and high schools. What I really enjoyed about elementary is trying to understand the importance of K through 2. Like that foundational piece is so important that if you get that right, it pays dividends through 12th grade. And so trying to understand better how kindergarten works, the trajectory through 3rd grade. I always think 3rd grade is such a pivotal point. It's kind of where you transition from, learning to read to reading to learn. And so just understanding the instructional piece better made a huge impact on me. I understood how to run a high school class, but elementary is such a different animal. And it helped me kind of have a broader perspective of the educational system.
Do you have to be more, and I don't want to say like a parent, but you've got to, I understand kind of the pushback from high school kids, but at the elementary level, you got to be more of a friend, maybe?
Well, I think that the difference is oftentimes elementary kids can't tell you what's wrong. Like they show you what's wrong by acting out, but they can't put together that because they missed breakfast that morning that they're hungry, right? Or something happened at the house and they didn't sleep well the night before. So they come and they act out, and they can't verbalize like what is wrong. And so it creates a different dynamic of, when a kid is acting out at elementary, the first thing that my mind goes to now is like, what is causing the acting out? Where at high school, if a kid's acting out, they know better and we fix it. And so I had to learn that piece is you've got a second grader that's really acting out, that is verbally acting out or sometimes even physically acting out. my initial response was, well, something's wrong. Like the kid's just being bad.
Yeah.
And the reality is you learn pretty quickly that kids are coming from some really difficult situations that are creating the conditions that they don't know how to handle them, and they act this way.
So particularly at that level, how much has the teacher's job become being able to recognize that and address those things, as opposed to, you hear a lot of people say, just teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic. Don't worry about all the social stuff. That's not realistic, is it?
Well, it's not realistic, and it's not what education has ever been about. I go back to, my kindergarten teachers and teacher and think about what she did for me. And even though she may not have expressed it, there was more than just math, reading, writing. It was a lot. I remember I didn't know how to tie my shoe, and her sitting there working with me on how to tie my shoe. And so it's not only not realistic, it's really not how we've ever done school. We talk about, academic press and personalization, and you've got to have a balance of it. You've got to have the academic press, but we also need the personalization. And what we mean by that is we want kids to be connected to each other. We want them to be connected to the adults in the classroom and even to the community. And if we can do both of those well, kids are going to succeed and they're going to be successful. But you've got to have both pieces. Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. How long were you at Bartlett?
2 years. So my daughter was born there. We were super close to staying in Shelby County. In fact, I'd applied to Hamilton County. Didn't really hear anything, and I'm in the attic of our house cleaning out the attic, getting ready to move into a rental because we were like, this is getting too small. And Jill Levine at Normal Park called me, and she was opening the upper school that summer, and she was like, can you come down for an interview? And I was like, sure, when? She was like, tomorrow. And I was like, I'm in Memphis. And she was like, yeah.
It's only 6 hours.
I was like, all right, I'll be there. And my wife was actually working. And as soon as she got off, we handed the baby across to each other, and I drove to Chattanooga, interviewed with Jill the next day. And then she offered me the position as assistant principal at Normal Park Upper, which I thought would be I think she thought this too, like a 2 to 3 year gig. But this was in 2008. So everybody knows what happens in 08, 09.
Great recession.
Yeah. And it hit the schools really hard. And so in I think January or February, they call an assistant principals meeting at Hickson High School. I'll never forget it, going in, sitting in that auditorium. I barely know anybody. I'd just moved back and was sitting there, and they're like, we're cutting. It was something like 43 assistant principal positions. Oh. And that was my reaction. I'm like, just move my family here. Those positions are getting cut. And it essentially was like every man for himself. And I'm looking around the room, and I'm like, well, I'm the new guy, still pretty young at the moment. I was, just turned 31. And so I'm like, I'm in trouble here.
Yeah. You just moved back, and gosh.
Yeah. But I tell people this all the time, and I think it was just a survival move. But, at the time, there was an assistant superintendent, James Colbert, who was pretty clearly at the moment like the right hand of the superintendent. And I'd never met him. He was actually working in one of the other areas of the district, but he was at that meeting. He's the one that told us. So after the meeting, I went up to him and was like, never met you. This is who I am. I need 30 minutes with you. And he was like, give my secretary a call. And I gave her a call and went and met with them for 30 minutes. And he was like, what? And I was like, you're going to be making decisions. I want you to know who I am. Yeah. And I applied for every open position that spring. I think I interviewed 8 different times. And at that point, you had to go in front of the superintendent at the final thing. And I went in front of him 4 times. And finally, at the 3rd time, he was like, when are you going to stop coming to my office? And I was like, well, as soon as you give me a job, I'll stop coming to your office.
Good for you.
but ended up at Lookout Valley Elementary that next year, which ended up being just an amazing blessing.
But what a smart thing to do with the assistant superintendent, Mr. Colbert, in that you're in there with how many other assistant principals? 43?
No, they cut 43. There was like probably 140.
So you're just a number at that point.
100%.
And very easily going down the list and sees, Justin Robertson, 1 year or 2 years experience.
6 months.
Six months. Oh, okay, let's get rid of this guy.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know who you are. But the lesson for anyone, younger person listening, you got to make sure that the people who make those decisions know who you are and what you contribute and your value.
Yeah, and beyond just the numbers, right? Because again, everybody can point to numbers, but it's I think we're not great at this in education, and we're trying to do a better job of it. But it's also with the business world outside, we've got to make connections there.
Yeah.
We've got to collaborate. We've got to go and have lunch with people or sit down for coffee. And educators just aren't naturally. We don't think that way.
Because schools and education's always, in my eyes, been an island.
Yes.
You got the business world over here, you got education over here, and to your point, they really need to work together, not just to have those relationships, but business obviously needs education, and education needs the support of business, and those relationships are critical.
It hit me, and it's funny. I just now remember the principal at Germantown High School. His name was Lonnie Harris, and Lonnie was really good to me. He knew pretty quickly that I wanted to get in administration, and he was one of the first people that was like, "You need to meet this person." When someone would come in, and I was come here, he introduced me, and he talked a lot about the importance of networking within the district, and it's something that I think every time if people ask me advice, it's one of the first pieces of advice I give is like, you need to get to know people.
Well, and to your point, it's critical. And anyone that's been through a forced job change, you have to pull out that Rolodex, and I'm using an old term, and contact all the people that you know to see who can help you. And I found one of the magic things you can say to someone is, "I need your help. Can you help me?"
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, people will do everything they can to help you.
Yeah. It was hard though. And it makes me, we've gone through a couple of different times since then of where we've had to cut back jobs. And I'm always super sensitive because I go back and I know the stress that it caused, me, that it caused my wife in that moment. And so I'm always sensitive to us having to do that, but also trying to, again, provide some advice to people and be like, put yourself out there, go for jobs that maybe you aren't qualified for yet, but you're at least getting in front of people for interviews. You're taking advantage of opportunities, and that networking eventually will pay off.
Well, you build that network and you get to practice interviewing.
Yeah.
Which is critical. And, someone told me that at a young point in my career that, do a bunch of interviews because the more you do, the better you get.
Yep. So
you come to Normal Park Upper?
Mm-hmm. Right at the time it opened.
Yeah. I remember when that opened, the school was a bit in disrepair, and I remember the business community coming together and really doing a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. The first time I walked up on the campus was the day that they were announcing or starting the renovation, and I had no idea what I was walking into. I thought I was walking into a few faculty members and a couple of parents, and it was like 1,000 people. And I was like, oh, it's a bigger deal than I thought, and had a great experience there. I learned a ton from Paige Watson, who was the principal at Bartlett, but learned even more from Jill Levine. Her energy around Normal Park and around that community was contagious. Her ability to organize people and hold different groups accountable for outcomes really was something I'd never seen. And so those two experiences at Bartlett and at Normal Park in different ways prepared me to be a principal.
Yeah.
I always talk about in Memphis, I learned how to be a teacher, learned how to be an assistant principal, but it was in Chattanooga that I really learned how to be a leader.
Yeah. When you talked about the meeting where they're cutting 43 positions, and you end up at Lookout Valley as principal. Was that a result of those 4 or 5 interviews?
Oh yeah. I interviewed, I could name all 4 or 5 off the top of my head that I remember going, and you had to interview for individual schools back then. So
you can do like one general interview and then you go, well, you know what, he would fit well over here.
It was, in fact, Lookout Valley, I'd been through so many interviews that when it originally posted, I didn't apply for it. And James Colbert called me and was like, why did you not apply for Lookout Valley? And I was like, Mr. Colbert, I'm done. Like, I'm tired. I just need to know where I'm going. And he was like, get on your computer tonight and apply for that job. I was like, does that mean I'm going to Lookout Valley? And he was like, no, but apply for that job. And so, I applied for it and went and interviewed. But Lookout Valley was, it was a blessing that I didn't know I needed. It is such a neat community. It's such a great little school. And it allowed me on a smaller scale to get ready for bigger jobs. Like, I don't think I would be here today if I didn't have that year at Lookout Valley.
Do you think Mr. Colbert knew that and was kind of his way to say, you know what?
I don't know what he was
polish you up a
thinking.
little
I
bit.
saw him a couple years ago at a national conference and went up to him and I was like, do you remember me? And he just laughed and he's like, I know exactly who you are. And we kind of reminisced about that story. But I think he obviously had some intention of like, how do we get this person off to a good start? Oftentimes, and we've made this mistake of, we drop people with a ton of talent, a ton of potential into really hard situations instead of like working them. Not that any school is a minor league, but you see it with number 1 draft picks of oftentimes they spend a year or 2 years in minor leagues before they come up to the majors. And we've put some people that had a ton of talent and a ton of potential in positions that they probably weren't ready for and ended up hurting them in the long run, where Lookout Valley was like a ton of work and I loved it and I got after it and we got better. But looking back on it, if they had dropped me in Red Bank High School that year, I wouldn't have made it.
Yeah, and I think that sports analogy is a good one, whether it's a baseball player or throwing the number 1 draft choice quarterback into a starting situation where they do nothing but lose games.
Yep.
And the confidence just takes a dive and that player's never the same again. It's true in the business world and the education world. So take me through the progression of Lookout Valley to where.
So Lookout Valley, I was pretty clear with them. Like, I will go wherever you tell me to go. I wouldn't choose elementary. So I was at elementary and basically it made it clear, like, I want to be in a middle or a high school. Well, the next year, 2 middle schools opened up, Red Bank Middle School and Brown Middle School. And I applied for those positions, ended up getting Brown Middle School, which again was an incredible opportunity. It was a school that had not performed well the year before, but everything that they needed to perform well was there.
Is that the school over near UTC, one of the new?
That's Tommy Brown.
That's Tommy, okay.
Brown Middle School is over off Highway 58 by Central.
I know what you're talking about.
But they had everything that they needed to be successful. It's just they hadn't put it together. And we came in and had Jane Reynolds was the assistant principal, and we got after it and had a great instructional coach. And the gains that we saw in the first year were, they were incredible. And we maintained that another year, which was even more difficult.
Yeah.
But was there for 2 years. And then there was a year, I can't remember why it happened, but in 2012, there was a lot of turnover among principals. And so they knew I wanted to go to a high school, and Red Bank High School opened up, which I thought was incredible. My brother had graduated from there. My middle brother went there for 2 years. So I go to Red Bank, and I remember calling my oldest brother when I found out, and I was like, "You're not going to believe this." He was like, "What?" I was like, "I'm going to Red Bank High School." And he was like, "As what?" And I was like, "As the principal." And he just started laughing. But one of the funny things, I'll probably get in trouble for this, they still, I don't know if they do today, but back then had all the records in this one room. It was the records room at Red Bank. And I went and found my brother's transcript and took a picture of it. And he's one of the smartest people I've ever known, but in high school, he was not that committed. I took a picture of it and sent it to all of his kids.
Oh, that's great.
Like, this is what your dad did in high school.
Just shows that, that doesn't define who you are at that point. How did you get into administration then? So you're at Red Bank for how long?
I was there for 4 years and loved it. Red Bank, I think, is like one of the best high schools in Chattanooga. It represents, I think, what our community looks like in terms of diversity. It's got kind of an old history. I always say that you're 3 people removed from Red Bank. You can, name off tons of people that went through the halls of Red Bank, but I was not looking to move. But if you remember in 15, 16, the district was going through a lot. Some issues with the state, back and forth with the state. We had the Ottawa High School incident over Christmas break. There was a change in administration, and Kurt Kelly came in as the interim superintendent sometime around April or May, and posted 2 assistant superintendent positions that I applied for. He had hired Jill as the chief academic officer. I'd spoken to her. She was like, "You need to apply." And I look back on it, and I'm not usually one that is willing to take a lot of big risks, but it was a big risk because it was an interim administration. And you could kind of read, the times and see that most likely they were going to go outside for the next superintendent. That's kind of the cycle that they were in. But I took a chance and went in as the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. And it was difficult times. It was difficult not only because of what the district had already been through, but the Woodmore bus accident was that fall, which was incredibly difficult for that community, but even for us the things that we had to do, just you try to push them out of your mind.
I couldn't imagine how hard that was because I was in media at the time, and just knowing our reporters who covered that, how that still affects them today. Matter of fact, the news director at Channel 3 at the time cites that incident as why he got out of the news business.
Yeah, I understand it. This is probably not healthy, but I literally just at times just have to.
Well, you have to.
Yeah.
You have to. So you did take a big risk. It's an interim administration, and you get it. And so what happens from there?
We actually had a really good, year 16 and 17, and got to interviewing for superintendent, and it was close. Like Kurt almost became the superintendent of Hamilton County Schools. In what ended up happening is, of course, Brian Johnson came in 17, 18. Didn't really get started until August, which made it hard because we're preparing for the year.
Yeah, you're
knowing
right there.
that someone new is coming in and may change everything. So it was difficult, but we ran with it. Brian came in, and I'll be honest with you, the first 4 months of working with Brian were probably the hardest 4 months that I've ever had. It was such a different mindset, a different pace. He is a disruptor, which, looking back on it, is exactly what we needed. I always talk now about the district as almost Brian Johnson, post Brian Johnson. And I'll give you a data point to show what all difference it made. Is like before Brian came, the previous 6 years, we had only met state expectations for growth, I think, twice out of 6 years. Since Brian Johnson, in those 6 years that there's been testing, we've met it all but once. And so it is a significant change of where the district was and where it is now. But Brian came in and was a disruptor. And I remember he made some changes, created the opportunity zone, moved Jill Levine over into that. And the assistant superintendent of operations was Zach Brown. Jill took Zach with her over there. So the three of us had kind of been doing like school leadership, teaching and learning, all kinds of stuff. Walking into a senior leadership meeting, and Brian pulls me aside and was like, "Hey, I'm moving them over here. You're going to do that." I'm like, "I'm doing all this by myself." And he was like, "Yeah." And I tell this story a lot, and I've never told it publicly, but twice that fall, I'm sitting in a meeting with Brian, and the first time he said it, it kind of caught me off guard. And I was like, I don't know how to take that. He was like, I don't know that you can do this job. And I was like, oh, okay.
Is that a challenge or?
I didn't know how to take it. And so, about a month later, and he's going through a reorg. He's made it clear, like when we get to the semester, we're reorging. So in ways, I was interviewing for my job every single day. And he said it to me again. He was like, I don't know that you can do this. And I remember looking over to him, and I was like, hey, it's like, that's the second time you said it to me. I was like, don't say it again. I was like, if you don't think I can do this job, I'm a hell of a principal. Put me back in a school. And looking back on it, I think it was a challenge, right? Of him like pushing me to be like, get after it.
He knew you could do it, but wanted you to have the confidence internally to do it.
I don't know. But, so he named me the chief schools officer in January of that year. And I cannot say enough about Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson is, he is an incredible superintendent. He's an incredible person. What he did for this district in terms of like resetting it and refocusing it, he was absolutely the right person at the right time to do it. And he made me a much better leader than I was before.
You mentioned when he came in, those first 4 months were tough. And I would imagine anyone that has a new boss come in, that transition's hard because you're used to doing things. What would be your advice to someone who's facing that? Is it patience? Is it getting to know the person, or
I think that it's, I don't know that patience necessarily works. I think that you have got to dig into what that person is ultimately trying to get after and figure out what part of that team you can play. And it took me a minute to realize what Brian was after is he wanted people that believed that this district could be great and that would be willing to get after it. Joe Wingate used to always talk about Brian being competitive. He wanted people that were competitive.
Yeah. You said he wanted people to believe this district could be great. And as an observer, someone who's been here 25 years observing it, it's easy to whip on the schools.
Oh yeah.
And it's easy to get a negative vibe, whether you're internal or external out of that. So I could see him, again, using the sports analogy of saying, well, wait a second, this is our team.
Yeah. He told me early on, he was like, this district is going to turn quickly. And I remember I'm laughing. I laughed kind of. He was like, what? And I was like, what do you mean quickly? And he was like, we're going to be the fastest improving district in this state. And I was like, okay. And at first I was like, didn't even know how to take that. Yeah. And I mean, as I said, 6 prior years, we had only met state expectations once or twice, maybe. 2018 test scores come back, and I'd just been named chief schools officer, which this was on me. And he calls me in the office and he's like, we got test scores back, and then my stomach dropped. And I was just like, okay, what are they? And he kind of like shakes his head and he looks up and he's like, we met expectations. And I remember I like sat down and I was like, dude, you cannot, I don't know you well enough yet to do that to me. But then the next year we were 5. We were a level 5 district. And it was you probably remember, down at the aquarium, they unveiled all these banners. We were 5s across the district and had literally become the fastest improving district in the state. People, I think, expect us to be a 5 every year, which is not really what we're looking for. What we're looking for is in achievement, are we improving? And in growth, are we meeting expectations? And if we're doing those two things together, that's the sign of a healthy district. The growth is going to go up, and at times will go down. But if you're doing those two things together, that is what districts should be shooting for: achievement and growth.
Yeah, because it makes you whole.
Yeah.
If you will, just trace your steps into the superintendent's position, because Brian Johnson was here 6 years, was it?
Just 4.
Just 4. God,
I know it seems like seems like it was longer. So
Then he got recruited to U.S. Express, and so
Yeah.
the chair opens up.
I was in, chief schools officer, and then in the fall of 2019, the chief operations officer resigned and took superintendent position in Richmond County, Georgia. And they were looking for a chief operations officer, and brought several people in. I mean, I went to lunch with a couple of them and just couldn't find the right person. And right around Christmas, I went to Brian and was like, I don't know if this would help. I know nothing about operations, but I think you know who I am and my work ethic. I would like to do it, because it'll help me prepare for what you're doing. So if you want me to, I will do it. And I want to do it. And he was like, well, let me think about it. And he thought about it, and we talked about who might take my job. And there were a couple people, but Neely Parker at the time was someone that was ready to do it. And so right before Christmas, he made the decision to put me in operations and to move Neely up, which, looking back on it, it was like the worst timing ever, because 2020 COVID hits. Yeah. Easter that year, tornado hits East Brainerd Elementary. So I walked into operations at like the worst possible time.
You had baptism by fire.
Oh, it was nuts. But that team is really good. People like Justin Witt, Brandon Allen, Bill Travis, Stacy Swafford at the time. We had so many good people on that team that, we reopened East Brainerd Elementary in 8 months.
That's incredible.
It was insane. But so I did, operations for 2 years, and then in July of, I guess, 2021, June or July, I can't remember which one it was. Brian called me in the office, and he was like, "Just want you to know this is about to come out. I'm resigning." And at the time, I can't remember what district it was, but there was a district around Atlanta that was open. I was like, "Are you going to?" And he was like, "Why would you even say that?" And I was like, "Well, because it's open, it's a big job, and you would be a great candidate." And he was like, "No, I'm going into the private sector," but he wouldn't tell me where he was going. And I remember I was like, why would you make that decision?
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me, but looking back on it, it made a ton of sense. Getting us through COVID was really difficult. Getting us through the 2021 year was incredibly difficult. I now know the level of stress he must have been under.
Oh, I bet.
And so I get that decision, but I always knew at some point he was going to end up back in the school district, and he's doing really well in Atlanta now.
So he leaves, and you decide to throw your name into the hat?
Yeah. I talked to him quite a bit about it before he fully left, and was like, "What do you think?" And he was super encouraging about it. I always wanted to be the superintendent of Hamilton County Schools. I thought it would be later.
Yeah.
Brian was super young when he got it. But if you look at, previous superintendents of Hamilton County, like, I would be considered young. But, so I always wanted it, but I thought it would be a little bit later. But at the time, I also recognized that, like, we were moving in the right direction. And with the team that we had in place and making some adjustments, I felt confident that we could continue to move it in the right direction. And this district means a lot to me. Like, I don't think there's anyone in this community that wants this district to be great more than I do. And so at the time, it may sound maybe a little egotistical, but I was like, I can do this. Like, we can put the team in place that can continue to move this district forward and do it the right way. And I worry about who would step in if it wasn't me. And again, when I say me, I mean like our administration. So
I got a couple more questions before you, because I know we're running out of time. What would you want people to know is the future for Hamilton County Schools under your guidance?
There are so many things. And I keep telling people that we can't chase shiny objects. Everybody wants to know, like, what is the next big thing? I'm like, there's not a next big thing. We're going to double down on the things that we're doing well and really increase the opportunities for kids. And so I'll give you two examples. Like, literacy is always going to be a focus. Well, what's the next big, there's not a next big thing. I'll go back to the K through 2 that I was talking about early. We have focused on that. We need to continue to get better there. And it's going to take a couple of years, but you're starting to see it in 3rd grade of where, for 2 years, we've been working intensely with our K through 2 kids and teachers. You're starting to see it pay off, but we've got to get better there and continue to improve literacy rates going forward. On the far end of it, I'm super excited about where we are right now with our Future Ready centers and the opportunities that will create for kids. It's not a new concept. It's just a tweak, right, of how we're opening up those centers to any kid. So you don't have to leave your high school to go be a student at Sequoia. You can be enrolled at Red Bank and spend half your day at the Future Ready Center at North River, right? When Franklin Roberts opens downtown, you can be a student at Lookout Valley, spend half your day at Lookout Valley, and then go to the Franklin Roberts Center. And I'll go full circle back to when I was in high school. Why is that so important? Is because most kids in high school aren't connected because of the academics. They're connected because of band. They're connected because of JRTC, because of sports for me, because of the musical theater department for some other kid. And so we want to keep those connectors for them, but then allow them the opportunity to go and explore as many career opportunities as they can.
They don't have to give up all of those things they had to go pursue something else. They could kind of float between the two worlds.
So across the board, we made this change, last spring, and our enrollment in our Future Ready centers, when you look at Career Construction Center, what used to be Sequoia and Harrison Bay, between those 3, demand has tripled.
Wow.
In 1 year. And so to me, like, what I want people to know is you hear out in the news, well, they need to do more vocational education. We're doing it better than almost anybody around us. And we've got some big announcements hopefully coming out with Franklin Roberts that I think will be a massive change for opportunities for kids in Hamilton County schools. So those are 2 of the things I would point out of just saying, there's not big shiny things. We just have to double down on what we're doing well and build on those things.
You're doing the blocking and the tackling.
I try to do that. Yeah.
It's not sexy, but boy, it's sure you get some victories.
Yep.
Before I get to my last question, I want to remind our listeners who makes all this possible. And it's thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. You can follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, Justin, last question. What would you tell that 25-year-old self is important for a happy life?
If I think back where I was at 25, this is such a cliche to say, but there were times that my wife was in pharmacy school. I was teaching, making I think like $42,000 a year. Was coaching on the side. Actually worked at Pottery Barn once or twice, and worked at a golf course at the time. And so there were moments where I wanted to like skip and be like, can't wait till she graduates pharmacy school until, this happens, because it was hard. Right. But I look back on it and I'm like, man, those were some really like great memories of somehow we were making it through a week with $100, or $50. But there were some really good memories that I wish I could go back. And it was, 25 would have been a few years before my daughter was born. My wife and I were married for 6 years before she was born, and it was an incredible 6 years. But I guess I would say, like, enjoy that 6 years, enjoy those little moments, even if it's, you're not having a steak dinner, you're sharing PB&Js, like, enjoy that time. And I think we did a pretty good job of it. But I think it's always easy to try to like skip moments in the journey, and really the journey is what's important, not where you're headed or not the destination.
It's such a great point, because so many people look back at those tough times as being the good times.
Yeah.
We made it through that. I'll give you a great example. A guy I used to work with in Memphis, he was my boss, he and his wife to this day, for their anniversary, go to McDonald's because that's all they could afford when they first got married. And that's their anniversary tradition. You know, we go have our McDonald's meal, and it brings back all of those things for them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, thank you so much for coming and doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I really enjoyed the conversation, and appreciate everything you're doing for Hamilton County, not just Hamilton County schools, but our area.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.